Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd just like to take your seats, we're going to start this session in just one moment. Um, so, first of all, thank you very much for being here. I know it's been extremely challenging for people to travel in this COVID era, and it's really great that you've all made the effort to turn up. For those of you who can't join us today, this session is actually being recorded and it will be part of the ATM virtual conference next week. So people can log in again and see it, which is great for our speakers. I'd also like to just quickly explain how this session is going to work. So basically, we've got half of our panel on stage, okay, and we've got half of our panel behind this screen. So they're appearing virtually from London and Hong Kong and other places in the world. And what we're going to do is actually split it into two, because one of our keynote speakers, who is Gavin Harris, who is the commercial director for APAC for Skyscanner, he's going to be doing an interview first, which is 20 minutes, and that will set the scene for the whole session. And the session itself is really looking at the application of technology to help us adapt to the new reality. I'll start by introducing myself. So I'm Daniela Wagner. I'm the Group Business Development Director for Jacobs Media Group, which is Europe's largest travel and hospitality media group. We run several publications, including Travel Weekly and Aspire. We run programs like Connections. And very importantly, in the context of this session, we run Travolution, which was founded in 2004 as a way of addressing the needs for the travel industry to understand the opportunities and challenges presented by the rise in technology. So it's been run really successfully for 16 years or so. We have a lot of thought leadership, which we share through newsletters and online, and we also run a number of events that you're probably familiar with, such as the Travolution Summit, which is run in London every year, and the Travolution Awards, which are the major technology awards run in November. And in addition to that, we've been internationalizing Travolution for the last few years in partnership with people like Travel Forward and Focusrite and Travel Technology Europe. And we've been running private dinners and forums and mini summits all over the world, including Malaysia, Kazakhstan, India, America, Germany, France, and lots of other countries. So that's the background to Travolution. We look forward to continuing with that internationalization as the world opens up again. But for now, what we're going to do is start this session with the executive editor Lee Hayhurst, who some of you will know, in conversation with Gavin Harris, who I said is the commercial director for Skyscanner. The interview lasts about 15 minutes, so I'm just going to take a seat and you can listen and enjoy, and then we'll invite the rest of the panel to join. Thank you.
Okay, so yes, thanks very much for that introduction. I'm delighted to welcome Gavin Harris, who's the commercial director of Skyscanner, the well-known flight meta search site. Welcome, Gavin. Hope you're okay this morning.
Hi, Lee. Yeah, very well, thanks.
So Gavin's going to take us through a quick presentation. He's got some data, some insights from Skyscanner, looking at consumer trends that they've been seeing over the pandemic, some emerging trends, and travel behaviour insights, and then he's going to finish by looking at some of the technologies that Skyscanner believe will help power the revival of travel and consumer confidence in the industry. So I'll hand over to Gavin. He's going to share his screen and go through his quick presentation, and that will set us up then for the panel discussion afterwards. So over to you, Gavin. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. If you bear with me just a second, I'll just share the screen. Okay, are we good to go, Lee?
Yep, good to go. Thank you.
Fantastic. So, hi there. So, many of you out there have probably come across either myself or some of my colleagues over the sort of pandemic period sharing some of the data that we have in Skyscanner, and it's really been focused around that sort of travel recovery piece, looking for those green shoots of recovery, and it's basically forward-looking demand search data. Today we're going to take a slight different angle, and the slides that I'm going to share over the next sort of 10, 15 minutes are really going to be focused around the travel trends that are developing in 2021, and specifically around those sort of trip planning behaviours that have changed now versus pre-COVID as well. So, firstly, if we look back to the sort of start of the pandemic back in sort of March 2020, you'll all remember that all but essential travel was stopped. Governments, airlines scrambling around to get people home as fast as possible. And the sort of first metric that we identified was just a dramatic shift from return flights into those sort of one-way flights as well, and reaching up to sort of 76% of all travel searches were one way at that stage. Big number, 7.1 billion, 9/10 of the world's population were under sort of border restrictions around that time back in March 2020. So pretty grim, and it just kind of hammers home the level of impact that we were all facing at that stage. Encouragingly though, from the start of the pandemic and through the pandemic, through the peaks and the troughs, the encouraging thing is that we're constantly seeing clear examples of sort of pent-up demand. Whenever there's a reduction in restrictions, or new corridors are opened, or there's high-profile government announcements, Skyscanner immediately sees significant spikes in traffic that gives us the confidence that people want to travel, that it's going to come back as well. And it's great to see, and our metrics flash away like crazy when this type of thing happens as well. The couple of examples that we're looking at on screen just now, on the left, last Friday, the government sort of high-profile announcement adding places like Portugal to the green list, and here you can see 616% uplift in bookings week on week, which is fantastic. And interestingly, 46% increase in searches week on week to the UAE from the UK, even though technically the UAE is still on the red list as well. But it just shows you that level of sort of pent-up demand. This slide's from the start of the pandemic back in sort of March 2020. Skyscanner started to immediately poll a lot of our users, and it ranged between sort of 6K to 10,000 users, to get a feel for how they were feeling about the recovery phase, or how bad the COVID situation was, and asking multiple questions. But this question that we've got on screen here is really about how do you feel the COVID situation is. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Is it staying the same as well? And encouragingly, as you can see at a global level, the green line there, it's been increasing since the start of the year at a global level. People are becoming happier with the situation, more optimistic, and 49% of people are thinking the situation is getting better. And you can see that red line that we don't want to see is now declining as well, from previously being at 40% down to 22% as well. That's at the global level. If you break it down, quite diverse in terms of where that sentiment lies just now, and there's obvious reasons for that. You can see that from the start of the year, the US is a big contributor to it. You've got America's at 65% on the green line there, and you can see EMEA more recently upticking, and then you've got the less confident noises coming out of the APAC markets as well, so only 37%, likely suppressed by the slower rollout in vaccines in some of those big markets out there, some important markets for Skyscanner as well, like South Korea, Japan, etc. This one's around visitor intent. So we're also asking Skyscanner users why they're visiting the platform, whether it's research, etc. And encouragingly, you can see the sort of deep purple line there, increasing since the start of the year. Up to 47% people are now planning a trip when they're visiting Skyscanner as well. And you can see there's a decline on the brown line there as well. Moving from the sort of global picture, now looking at the sort of Middle East region as well. And again, similar to what I showed before from Portugal and the UK, some encouraging signs, nowhere near the level of search traffic, but certainly encouraging signs as well. And you can see on the left there, we're seeing a sort of week on week uplift in searches from the UAE. And then again, if you flip it over to Saudi Arabia, that's an even bigger increase there, week on week, 87% increase in searches. The good thing about the region for Skyscanner as well, and what will probably be helping with this uptick in demand, is that Skyscanner recently added Arabic language to its desktop site and its mobile website as well, which was fantastic. A huge amount of work for any tech organisation, but incredibly proud to be able to offer that out as well. And now we're in a situation where travellers in the region can use Arabic, can see the flights results, but they can also now, in the traditional mode of meta search, they can redirect to a partner and automatically land within Arabic as well. So it's a far more streamlined, suitable booking experience as well. Keeping the spotlight on the UAE, this map just gives you a quick visual of where the top search countries are. This is for April to the end of the year travel as well. And it's countries like Pakistan, India, Philippines tend to repeat across the GCC area as well. So recently we launched a report called Skyscanner Horizons, analysing sort of the last 3 years of booking data at Skyscanner, really with the idea of not necessarily looking for green shoots of recovery, more about just how are the sort of trip planning behaviours of our users changing? What has COVID done to that and how it's changing as well? So the next few slides are going to cover insights from that report, key themes including the evolution of those trends, planning, change in spending habits, considerations of price versus value, etc. In this particular example, we're looking at booking horizons. So this is the time between you booking and your actual departure date. And you can see it start to grow again at the start of the year as the confidence starts to come back. We'll see that during times of low confidence, Skyscanner users will leave it late, as late as possible to book their trips as well, as you would expect. But as confidence starts to come back at a global level, you're seeing it return to that kind of normal level. So this one's looking at average trip duration, particularly for trips longer than 7 days or 20 days. And interestingly, at a global level, we're seeing an uptick in that. In 2019, the average trip length was 14 days. Now it's 16 days. The trips are longest at the end of European summer, the end of June and early July. And then they climb again at the start of September. With uncertainty around and still around in market in regions like Europe, and people are naturally pushing their trips back towards September and later in the year, their summer holidays as well. Now looking at a mix on Skyscanner between sort of domestic and international, and this won't be a surprise given the restrictions on international travel, but you can see it increasing. Almost a quarter of all bookings this year are 23% domestic, up from 17% in 2019 and 2020. That's the sort of shaded area. And you can see where that's been driven by. It's largely driven by APAC markets and the Americas, which APAC market is the orange line, and then Americas is in the blue. And you can see a slight uptick towards the end with EMEA, but obviously Americas, USA, APAC, with markets like big domestic markets like China, Japan, Korea, Australia, driving that change as well. We're also seeing a massive change and a massive shift in the top search global destinations. If you take away the likes of New York and Paris in this slide, travellers seem to be gravitating towards your resorts, your smaller coastal and island destinations. Some of the ones highlighted in here are sort of Cancun, Crete, and Mallorca. Behaviours, likely travellers looking to avoid the crowds, maybe concern over going back to their cities where they don't know what's going to be open, what events, what entertainment, etc. is there, and maybe preferring those sort of resort holidays where they know they're going to have the restaurants and all enclosed in that sense. This type of information is changing dramatically as the restrictions change, and it's the type of data that we've got available within our Travel Insight product. And we've been working with a lot of airlines, DMOs, and even duty-free brands who are extremely keen to find out where the next big destination is. And Skyscanner provides not just booking data, but search data. So even at times where you can't book a ticket because there's no itineraries, we're still seeing where people want to go as well. So a lot of our partners are keen to hear that in advance so that they can then tie that into forward to route planning, etc., and marketing activities from DMOs as well. Interestingly, it's not necessarily all about the cheapest ticket now, which we might have been guilty as in the past. The Skyscanner been known as a sort of cheap flights search engine. Travellers are now actually spending selecting tickets that are 28% on average more expensive than the cheapest that's on it. And it's behaviours changing because other factors are becoming important. Things like convenient flight times, they want to have less stops, direct routes, they're willing to pay a premium, and obviously COVID safety as well of the destination that you're going to. Probably won't be a popular one for the UAE market, this one, but this is looking at air ticket price. The period covered here is for travel between sort of June and October, and in the majority, people are spending less during COVID times. But then the outliers you can see here are Singaporeans. The ticket prices are much higher. Obviously, there's not that much out there to choose from as well under the current restrictions. But then the UAE, surprisingly, are spending more as well on the average ticket price. One of the things we've identified and spent a great deal of time at Skyscanner on is that travellers are clearly requiring more information now. And it's difficult because at the same time as requiring more information, this dramatic shift from sort of desktop usage to mobile usage continues. So we're trying to fit more information required into smaller screens as well. So it's a challenge for the tech industry moving forward. Right now, when Skyscanner travellers search for a flight, they can now do things like filter for a flexible flight, which is hugely popular now, flexibility. They can now select COVID insurance. We've got a new product called Xcover, which covers things like airline insolvency, trip cancellation and things. Seeing a big uptake on that in certain markets. They can also see an airline safety score, which is quite popular, and it'll score an airline based on sort of COVID factors like, does the airline have a mandatory face mask policy? Do they do a deep clean of the plane? Do the flight's crew wear PPE, etc.? And you see travellers actually gravitate towards higher scores, even like partners with higher scores, even when the price differentiates in that sense as well. One of the last ones we've got here, just to update, is providing the traveller information and trying to give them advice on their trip planning stage has been key over the last few months for Skyscanner. We launched this COVID interactive map, and it allows the travellers to input an O&D pairing, so where you're from and where you're travelling to, and it immediately then flags what sort of restrictions and what requirements for entry are on those. And you can easily flip between different destinations to see where you can go. And the map itself immediately shows the obvious ones. I'm hoping there's going to be a lot more green in those maps moving forward as well. So in summary, I think globally trip planning is rising, but it's rising alongside confidence levels, and it's our responsibility in the travel industry to help with those confidence levels. Travellers are seeking out more coastal destinations rather than the city breaks, and surfacing and clear information to travellers is going to be vital moving forward. And for us travel organisations, travel tech businesses, surfacing that information is going to be key to survive and thrive in sort of post-COVID times as well. Thanks, Lee. And finally, I mentioned Skyscanner Horizons document. Download a copy if you want. Check out partners.skyscanner.net, and also some of that sort of forward-looking search data. Then get in touch with our data partnerships team if you're interested to see where the demand's coming from. Thanks, Lee.
Great. Thank you, Gavin. You can unshare your screen now. We'll just finish up. So one thing I took from that as an overall message before we go into the panel detail is it's being relevant to people. I mean, you mentioned going out with your Arabic version, but understanding the customer and what they want is so key, because if you don't know that, you can't be relevant. And I think that's probably the message for everybody in travel today, is to get to understand what the customer wants, how trends are changing, and deliver what they want. And then if you do that, you should be okay. So I guess that's what Skyscanner is looking to do constantly.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the, I suppose, the silver lining in this situation is that we did have the chance as a product and engineering organisation to really focus down on what's the high impact stuff now. Can we focus on the high impact areas? And a lot of it came from just reaching out to the travellers to understand feedback in terms of what they were requiring, what questions they were asking. In the past, the flexibility of a ticket and cancellation, it was an afterthought. It was all about price, and the feedback from our users was that they needed that information now. And luckily, this sort of downtime where we maybe were able to free up a little bit of time rather than travelling around conferences around the world, as it was, it allowed us to really focus on those sort of product changes and adding those features for the traveller.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to wrap things up there. We're actually looking forward to getting back to being able to travel around.
Absolutely.
Another time we'll do this face to face in Dubai. Unfortunately, this year it wasn't possible. So, Gavin, thank you very much for your time today and setting up the discussion. I think now I just need to hand over to the onstage moderator to introduce the panel. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lee, and thank you, Gavin. I have to say that was a pre-recorded interview. If you want to get the data that was shared, please come and see me afterwards, and I'll be happy to send you the slides. And we're now going to welcome our physical and our virtual panel, and start with the people we have on stage. I'd like to introduce Melanie Bryant, who is the Regional Director, Consulting, Onboarding and Optimization for Travelport, and also David Klippenstein, who is in charge of government services, MasterCard government data and services. On the screen, we have Lee, who you just heard, who's our Executive Director, and also Tony Smith, who is the Senior Vice President, Corporate Development and Communications for iFree Group, and Alex Vilera, who is the COO of Mabrian, who is a new partner of ours. And I think that's it on stage. So what we're going to do now is actually to hand over to Lee, who's going to conduct a remote interview with both the physical and virtual panelists. And if anybody in the audience wants to ask a question, please put up your hand and I will stop him and you can ask a question. We do have a roving microphone, so please let's make this as interactive as possible for the next 20 minutes or so. Lee, over to you.
Thank you, Daniela, and welcome from London on the England. Quite the side of the world. We are going to be moving around the world for the next time. So, as Daniela said, we've got two people on stage and two people off stage. So, she's going to touch the main things there, bringing the people on stage who you can see and sort of see, but we'll see how we get. We know lots of things over the last so the first one we can try and session, both physical and virtual. We're going to ask each of the panelists a quick introductory question, and so they can just introduce themselves briefly, but just start to talk about some of the topics. So let's start with Melanie on stage first. So let me over to you. So you may have all seen Travelport's gone through a very radical rebranding during recent weeks. Just tell us briefly how the new Travelport will emerge from really different from the company that went into it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Lee. So I think the pandemic has given us the opportunity to pause and reflect on who we were and what we wanted to be when we grew up, but also around what the industry is going to need to recover from the pandemic. So I think the travel industry, being one of the earliest adopters of technology, is still quite full of complexity and legacy technologies which traditionally have slowed us down. So when we kind of reflected on that, we decided we needed to change the paradigm. So the Travelport that will come out of this pandemic is not the stuffy old GDS that you might be used to. We're bold, we're agile, we're leading the pack through innovation, but mostly we're solely focused on one thing, which is to provide a worldwide travel retail platform that connects travel buyers with travel sellers who share our passion for creating amazing travel experiences. And I think that also is what is at the core of our investment in our next generation platform, which we've named Travelport Plus. So we're really looking to, remove that complexity from the industry and simply allow travel agencies to do what they do best, which is to create lifelong travel memories for people.
Right. So taking the best they have and reintroducing it with sophisticated things. Let's move over now to we're going to bring in Alex from Norga. So welcome, Alex. And tell me, it's quiet in Norga at the minute. So you're waiting, really is going to go ahead for the UK, and maybe you'll get a good summer season.
Yeah, absolutely. Highly and on stage and the video as well.
So we've provided data insights to the travel sector and working and before COVID, and I guess there's no more need for that now, we want to what we've experienced. But from your perspective, what's going on with the learnings for you as a company from the pandemic?
Yeah, I think from what Melanie was mentioned, last question mentioned, the reduction of complexity, right? We are a technology company, a big data company. We've been dealing with data related to travel for more than 5 years now. But there's something that hasn't changed during the pandemic. The idea is that the takes to reduce complexity in terms of what we get, the insights that we generate out of the data. That's something that remains exactly the same. On the other side, obviously, we have seen an increasing demand of new data sources, which is something that we are very familiar with. We are constantly adding new data sources. Some of the old data sources that we used to work with have increased in terms of volume, for example, we don't have as much travelers over the years. We have to review social media, for instance, and it's something that is creating information. We expect that it will increase again when the recovery is working at full speed. But at the same time, there are new data sources that nobody was staring at like 6 months ago. For example, the vaccination rates is something that at this point is really quite fundamental. Being able to measure travel influence for the future, and it's something that probably around 3 years, nobody was caring about yet in terms of how to use to travel observation. One of the indicators that we've been looking at and providing to our clients before intensity during this period is what we call the perceived security indicator. Based on what we analyze on social media, and what's the perception of any destination in terms of security from their visitors. And obviously, we've seen drops at the beginning of the pandemic, but now we can also track the last almost a year, a couple of months, historical data, and we can see how destinations are recovering in terms of the satisfaction and the perception of interest of these destinations. This can then obviously lead to other indicators like the ones that Gary was giving in the previous round, like increase or substantial increase on bookings, and overall keeping in mind this reduction of complexity that we are mentioning. That's the key insight, the key takeaway, the key takeaway that we get from of this feedback.
Okay, good. Let's be back into the stage now, and David from Mastercard. I obviously a lot of learning, Daniela. Lucky enough to be visiting President in Dubai, which is one of the world's smartest cities. But I just want to hear quickly from you about how Mastercard is working with quite other cities around the world destination to take the best potential of digital solutions.
With Dubai specifically and other DMOs in the region, we've been very focused on on two themes. So one of them, in a more advanced DMO context, such as with Dubai Tourism, we've been focused on helping them measure and drive marketing return on investment, like exploring how we can partner with them to help them drive more economic impact per unit of effort, shall we say, applied towards a particular corridor. This means being smarter in terms of your targeting, your outreach, your channels, when it comes to attracting your target segments. Now, with other DMOs in the wider EMEA region, one of the things that's a focus of Mastercard is all about financial inclusion. So when we look at the tourism sector, it's not just the DMO; it's also the merchant partners. And what we've been doing there is focusing on enabling SMEs with the kind of traditional thoughts around enablement, such as payment acceptance, access to credit, but also, and of course, e-commerce readiness, but also thinking about how we could help governments make their lives easier when it comes to license renewals, payments, fees, and collections, or just receiving disbursements, for example, in the context of relief aid. So it's really, at least more broadly in the region, we've taken like a two-prong approach when it comes to how we can leverage our assets and capabilities to support governments and their constituents.
Thank you, very good to hear you. Finally, this is Tony. He's over in Hong Kong, so we're our first speaker today. Obviously, actually, because of what David just said about connectivity, probably that kind of thing that we talked about with the entities, but what are the trends that you've been seeing that you think will endure post-pandemic?
Well, as I think we've kind of grown in the last 5 years into a multi-division, multidisciplinary company. Starting off with connectivity, that's been our core values, our core business, and starting with our running SIM card, and that's going back right 5 years ago, saying it has to be simple. It's been growing, and you want to be connected wherever you are in the world. Our SIM card was one of the first that you can just top up wherever you are in the world, and it automatically upgrade your operations. From that, we came to eSIM, and then those kind of expanded into our smart city network and into our smart destinations as well. So, connectivity is one of those things, and everything about our technology that we're looking for has to be simple, and we have become very much overwhelmed by data, overwhelmed by different types of technology that do virtually the same thing but don't speak to each other. So we're trying to look at these kind of solutions, especially with COVID and with the social issues we had the year before in Hong Kong, which closed down our markets for the roaming side of things, and our online travel agency activity. We haven't closed down, it's just down 90%. So we started looking at other things. So looking at how the transit process, not the booking process which we have and the communications process which we have, it's the transit through the airport. So we're looking at biometrics and AI, and looking at how we can make that transit through the airport seamless, all the way through check-in, all the way through security and immigration, even with the retail and the duty-free. So we're really broadening our horizons as to how we can make it frictionless kind of process all the way through. So yes, connectivity is the integral part of that, because all these different processes have to contact each other, they have to be connected, and they have to be able to see a simple protocol that is actually universal of this, understand each other.
Yeah. But we talked a lot about simplicity then, and clearly I think the adoption of technology is very much linked with it being simple to use, simple to adopt that and use it. But at the same time, we all talked about how we're getting a bit more complex. How does the travel industry, which is a very complex ecosystem, moving parts, and therefore complexity at its core, actually make this more simple process, but particularly for passengers, because you can imagine what's happened in the last 12 months. We can emerge from this with a whole new layer and set of protocols and restrictions and so on, bureaucracy, that makes the whole process a lot more complicated, a lot less efficient. That's probably the danger in commercials. The travel experience that is less than optimal. How does the industry using the light travel fight against that?
Yeah, I certainly do think it's a danger, and having travelled recently myself with the family, just understanding all the different protocols now that you need to go through with, tests and documentation, etc. It's complex, and it's complex depending on where you're coming from and where you're going to. I think similar to what we saw with Gavin's, being able to surface the right information at the right time around some of those protocols to the traveller is going to be really fundamental. Giving them that, very distinct insight in a simple way into what they need to do to work through these new processes and these new complexities. And standardisation will be key as well. So the way that we describe and connect to these new data sources and then surface them up to whether it's the traveller or the travel agency in a meaningful way is going to be really, really important. So we were able at Travelport to adapt our, for instance, our rich content and branding system, which traditionally showed people things like how many, whether it was a free seat or luggage allowances, etc., within the various different airlines, to now be able to show the safety protocols on board. And so being able to quickly adapt technology, which is simple, will be fundamental to moving forward with the rapidly changing pace.
Yeah. Before the pandemic, Scotland was experiencing significant growth, actually, that part, perfectly. So a lot of this wasn't really on mobile. Now we look what's Mastercard doing, how do you sort of Mastercard see the world evolving, particularly for sort of small and medium sized that maybe previously were putting off kind of moving to digitalization and adopting technology.
Sure, and let me build on what Gavin showed. So context, for over 10 years until 2019, travel and tourism was growing roughly twice that of world GDP. So in that context, there wasn't an urgent need to leverage technology. Obviously now, things have changed, and now there's more of a burning platform, hence, our discussion that we have today. Now, given as what we just saw from Gavin, there is pent-up demand, and depending on how you estimate it, there could be, $1 trillion, $1.5 trillion of unspent vacation money, sitting there, looking for a way to generate those memorable experiences. So we have pent-up demand on an aggregate. What we also see is pent-up demand revealed, not as in terms of searches or surveys, but what's called like revealed preferences. What are people actually doing with their money, right? And from here, we see key leading indicators of the appetite to travel within 3 to 6 months is typically like fine dining, eating out, and then fine dining, eating out, and of course more luxury discretionary spend typically leads increased appetite to travel over the next kind of 3 to 6 months. And we've seen this kind of go above in a number of markets pre-pandemic levels, right? Now, obviously, if you look at what's going on in accommodations and flights, I mean, obviously there's a lag, and sometimes it's structural, sometimes it's policy, right? Depending on each market's rules and regulations. So we are seeing a trajectory, and depending on how you look at it, given the pent-up demand, given the improving health context and low base, we're hopefully looking at low to low mid double-digit growth for the next kind of medium term, I'd say.
We usually have usually there's a lot of SMEs in travel. There's many global brands we all know very well, but actually below that there's a lot of a lot of SMEs out there. What do they need to do, you think, in the new world to get back more efficiently and to make get back to making money in travel once the demand is there?
Was that to myself?
That was back to you.
Oh, okay, sorry. I wasn't sure who you're speaking with. So, in the SME context, first and foremost, very traditionally, you need to get digitized. You need to be able to accept payment, ideally low touch, contactless payment. Need to have e-commerce presence, social media presence. Those are just the basics, right? Going beyond that, once you have these building blocks in place, then you can start thinking of getting access to credit, and also with this type of digitization, it also facilitates digital identity, which could then enable any type of relief aid to be more appropriately distributed to government constituents, right?
Okay, let's go to Alex now. From talking about the companies in travel, maybe also SMEs, maybe not very haven't used data very much embedded into their businesses pre-COVID, but now are looking to do this. What's the biggest challenge for most companies in travel to not only collect it, but actually use it to gain actual insights out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. There's one idea that I really like to express this. In the value of something about big data, and that's the idea of there's an ocean of data out there. And this is something that for the travel industry, digitalization processes have been there for a long time. The matter is not of collecting more data, but to convert this data in insightful so that the insightfuls that allow both SMEs and big companies to take smart decisions in terms of how to tackle this, how to inspire people to come to your destination if you're in DMO, or how to tackle those money personas that are not going to be the first going out to as the travel destination arrives. For us, it makes a difference for us. It's a big hotel chain, it's a small boutique hotel. Our mandatory motto at Mail is we must make it simple. We do have the scientists and the engineers to take care of for people like when we have not engineers, somebody coming out of technology. It's very difficult to understand, but behind the same position as our clients or our SMEs, we do have engineers taking care of the complexity. We need to drive this into actionable insights that should allow companies to take smarter decisions.
Lee, before you continue, sorry Lee, we have a question from the floor. Can we take the gentleman at the back? Please ask your question.
My question is for Alex. Could you tell us more about the perceived security indicator you spoke of earlier, and what is the perceived security indicator for the UAE or Dubai? And my question is also, do you think this perceived security indicator is an accurate measure to what is really going on the ground? And my last question is, if technology is such an enabler for the tourism and travel industry, do you think that governments are taking heed or giving attention to those data that you are generating? Because we see a lot of discrepancy among different countries about how different countries perceive a certain holiday destination or certain popular destination. Thank you.
So that.
May I go into the action that I see? Thank you so much for the question. The perceived security indicator is an indicator that we calculate based on mentions of social media. One of the components of our technology stack is measuring social media, discarding anything additional related to tourism, and then applying natural language processing techniques which track the sentiment of those nations that are related to security indicators of their destination. So basically what the PSI measures is the perception that visitors from foreign countries have on one given destination in terms of security. How accurate is that indicator? It's an indicator as any other indicator in space. We have a track record of 7 years of calculation of this indicator. We have seen how this indicator evolves whenever there's a security incident, and we tried it, for instance, during the terrorist attacks in New York in the 2015, 2016. So we measured the impact of these attacks and then the recovery of this indicator. And specifically going to the numbers of the actual figures in Dubai and the UAE, we're certainly run this analysis, and at this point, Dubai is in the top 10 of most secure in terms of PSI destinations in the world. It was in the past, there was a decline during the pandemic, but now Dubai, for instance, compared to London, Madrid, or Rome, to give you a few examples, Dubai has a higher score in terms of perceived security from the visitors. And I think that the last part of the question is how the governments take advantage of this and related to the different messages that we receive. We work with a lot of clients worldwide, and they make this indicator quite similar because it's not only that you have one score of 90 or 95, but it's also that you have to take a look to how these scores evolve in different origin markets. For instance, Dubai may have a 95 score, but maybe for the UK market, it's still below because it has not been included in the green list of destinations, right? So at that point, you know that overall your destination is perceived as a secure destination. But in one key specific origin market as the UK, you need to drive extra efforts. So this is linked to the kind of communication that you will plan to execute for that specific market. Yes, to give a bit of that. And thank you again for your question.
Thank you, Alex. Yes, and thank you for the question from the floor. Let's been saying back here. Just it actually leads on to that a little bit in terms of how governments are acting, how the travel experience is there. What do you expect to see from the travel experience? You don't contact us on mobile or otherwise anything. It seems to be going to accelerate. Do you expect to be checked in by those and stuff, or will it be more subtle?
I think it'd be more subtle. I mean, I think on the ground now, I mean, it's just impossible to tell where we can go. I mean, going back to Alex's point, it is about information because I think now we have countries that are in the midst of a dreadful crisis. We have countries that haven't been affected so bad, but are now, like Taiwan, Philippines, like in places, same as Singapore. Hong Kong has been pretty okay, but it's perceived to be an unsafe destination, regardless of the very low percentage of cases that happen. And that's had a pushback against vaccinations here, unfortunately, because people are saying, why should we get vaccinated? We have less than 5% of the population of both vaccine, and I'm one of the people that have. But I can still not travel. So if I was to go and put 2 weeks in quarantine there, have a 3-day conference in some place, and then have 21 days quarantine when I come back. And I have to pay for all of that. Middle Eastern Airlines, if something happens, they've included clothing cover, including the hotel, if something happens. So, it's probably good to get on a ship from Hong Kong to Europe than playing that. So I think getting rid of the insecurity and actually having some definitive protocol, and I think this is what it all comes back down to. It's like agreeing on what those protocols are about all the different airlines, all the different governments, all having different aspects of it. So I think what we need is reassurance. And these travel bubbles, they are firstly left, right, and centre. Our travel bubble between Hong Kong and Singapore has been on and off for the past few months. And our online travel agency, Headley, we just don't know how to deal with all these Russia bookings, and then you cancel them because it's postponed or it's indefinite, it's this and that. So we work with travel ports, so travel ports might have a better answer on how the travel agents can actually cope with this on-off situation in different countries. But I think we just need to simplify the process and just reassure the public. Vaccination is one way to go, okay, but also be aware that we're not totally going to do these types of viruses. So every time there's a small flare up, 1 or 2 or 5, which is the difference between Hong Kong and Singapore. And if we have 5 consecutive cases, then the bubble goes off. That's the difference.
Professor Talbot might be the next question. I think we're nearing the end, so let's talk now, and I think I'll ask Anela for a final question. But Melanie, so you did mention travel agents. I know you would say this is Talbot, but you believe that there is a renaissance of travel agents approach because of the need for that clarity of information. How do you see that role evolving, the role of travel agents, and in tandem with technology of very
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've seen most recently is that there's a 33% increase in people who are wanting to use travel agencies to book their travel, which is great news. And most interestingly, the biggest increases come from the 18 to 38-year-old age group, who obviously are the tech-savvy people, but are really wanting to tap into that insight and experience that the travel agent has to help them navigate through this more complex world. So I think what then becomes really important to us as a travel technology company is making sure we enable that travel agent to be able to access the right content, the right information with high levels of automation to ensure that they can really deliver that value to their customer, the traveller, in a really simple, easy way, and guide them through the process and get them travelling again.
I'm afraid of time there, and I believe we're looking to wrap things up shortly. So I'll hand back to you now to do that, and that's the final question of our section. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Lee. Yes, we just have 5 minutes left, in fact 3 minutes left, so I'd like to ask each of our panellists to answer 2 questions. First of all, in one word, what is the most important thing that we can do to get the world moving again? And secondly, what's the biggest opportunity that you see post-COVID for your company? Starting with you, David.
What was the first question? It was the
Just
one word.
in one word, what do we need to do to get the world moving again?
I think determination.
Information.
Determination.
Sorry?
Determination, sort of resilience.
Oh, determination. Determination. Yes, absolutely.
So, and one of biggest is to be for us. It would be partnering with the government's cross-border travel going again, right? Obviously, you know, health context dependent.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Melanie?
So I think simplicity would be my key word, but can you repeat the second question, sorry?
Yeah, just what do you see as the biggest opportunity for Travelport in this case, in a post-COVID time?
Yeah, I think the biggest opportunity is really to be able to, reinvent the travel ecosystem and make it simpler for people to connect and buy and sell travel.
Great. Tony?
I think, in one word, agree. We don't have to agree on a protocol. We don't have to agree on what's important and what's unnecessary. Practice and business.
And the biggest opportunity for iFeed Group?
I think the biggest opportunity for us is the expansion of our medtech and our security biometric systems for travel. I think we can be able to do these testing kits that can be used and give instant virtually instant results. So work on that type of technology. And those kits can also be used for other kind of persons or afterwards.
Thank you. Alex?
In terms of the work, I would say, if I may use to, it's building trust or rebuilding the trust of travelers or of the ecosystem to get back on track and get back to the place. And in terms of the biggest opportunity for us in Namibia, companies and all the ecosystem in travel have learned the hard way that the traditional methods of taking decisions, for instance, calling to visitors and answering questions that what are they going to do and what they want to do for the next vacation, something that has a lot of weight because the increasing complexity and the changing environment has made things more real time, right? So for us, definitely that's an opportunity. 3 years ago, we were kind of the crazy guys speaking back in terms of technology for travel, and nobody really understood what it was about. Nowadays, we can explain it in real time. Oh, this is the perception security of your destination last week, and this is where you have a problem, and this is where you don't have a problem, and there's an opportunity for you to act in this specific market to reinstate the security. So,
Great.
big opportunity for us.
Well, thank you very much. So all I'm going to do now is to thank our audience for being here today, remind you that this session has also been recorded and will be available next week. Huge thank you to our panelists from around the world. Thank you so much for being here with us on stage and for joining us from London, Menorca and Hong Kong. And a final thank you to our partners at Travel Forward for including us in this program, and to the tech team for making it all work. Well done, guys. Big round of applause, please. Thank you.